that parallel of fear and identity and how they kind of go hand in hand like that. And I think you're right. And when I think about the cancer of the soul, that is regret. It just eats and eats and eats. And there are people listening to this right now that are just nodding their head, yes, like I have traded away who I am, who I want to be, for who others think I'm supposed to be. And we all do to certain degrees because we live in a social system, right? So we're going to make compromises so we fit in. But some of us make those sacrifices, I think, or those trade-offs more in a way that really just cuts at our soul. So for those people listening right now, what's the starting place? Where can they go to start to turn things around for themselves?
Yeah. And dude, I've been that person. You know, if I look at my life at 27, 28 years old, I was like, I have no self-esteem. I have no confidence. I do not believe in myself in any capacity. And the only way that you're going to build up to the place of being able to do that is you're going to have to do difficult things. You're going to have to challenge the narrative of who you think that you are by doing that thing that's so hard, right? It's writing the book, it's running the marathon, leaving the relationship, asking for help, right? I mean, I remember it's fascinating to me that one of the number one things I teach men when they come into my programs is boundaries, right? And it's like, think about this for a second. If you've never been allotted the space to be you, you're going to have to learn how to be you. And that's super difficult. And so when you're in this position, you're like, I want to be able to step into everything that we're talking about right now. The number one thing that I believe that you can do is get massive clarity in your life.
On today's Workplace Therapist Show, we're going to take on a little bit heavier topic. We're going to talk about fear and identity and the challenges and struggles we have with truly living out the identity that we want. So we're all human beings. We live in a society. We make trade-offs so we can fit in, so we get approval and avoid disapproval. But there's a cost to all that. So my guest today, Michael Unbroken, he's going to walk us through his journey of trauma and the identity choices that he made throughout life, and ultimately living a life that he's designed for himself. And there's great ways, not only inspiring ways that we can do this, but real true steps that we can take. So listen to my interview with Michael, see what steps and ideas you come away with, and at the end, I will share with you all my notes. I'm Brandon Smith, and you've known me as the workplace therapist. My passion and purpose has always been to cure workplaces from dysfunction and to make your work life better. But did you also know I'm the co-founder of the Leadership Foundry? Well, in addition to our platform, we're excited to share that we're launching the Leadership Foundry podcast this January as a result. This podcast is free, and these curated episodes will answer the questions you have as a leader right now. Things like, how do I more effectively delegate so I'm not doing all the work of my team? How do I communicate more effectively so we're all on the same page? How do I manage my time and help prioritize? And meetings. We all know meetings are such a pain for all of us. Catch these episodes and the first episode on January 10th on iTunes, Spotify, and your other favorite podcast platforms. Michael, I am so excited to have you on the show today, and I'm so excited about our topic. I mean, everyone can relate to the challenges of fear and identity. So I really want to dive into that and hear more about your journey through those things. But before we do that, maybe a good starting place really is your journey. Tell us a little bit about your story. What really got you here, and what were some of those pivotal moments?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you the elevator pitch version, of course, so we're not here all day. But basically, when I was 4 years old, my mother, who was a drug addict and alcoholic, she cut off my right index finger. And so that kind of gives you baseline right out the gate. And people go, how could your mother do that? And I'm like, oh, it was a continuation of the perpetuation of childhood trauma. She married my stepfather when I was 6, super abusive, would kick the crap out of my brothers and I, put me in the hospital multiple times.
And that was your stepfather?
That was your
stepfather?
Stepfather.
Okay.
Correct.
Wow.
Never met my real father. Named after him, which was something that dealt with identity, which we'll dive into later. And by the time that I was 8, we were getting bounced around with families in the Mormon church. And so I actually lived with about 30 different families between 8 to 12 years old.
Wow.
And when I was 12, my grandmother adopted me. So I'm biracial, black and white. And you think that'd be a godsend. But my grandma was an old racist ass white lady from a town in Tennessee you've never heard of. Now you can really start to insert identity crisis. So I got high for the first time when I was 12, drunk when I was 13, and by 15, I was expelled from school for selling drugs. And I was in this position in my life where I was selling drugs, breaking into houses, stealing cars, running from the police, getting shot at.
Wow.
And looking at this life, what was ahead of me. And luckily, I got put into a last chance program, but I still did not graduate high school on time. Basically, they handed me the diploma and they're like, dude, you just got to get the hell out of here. We just cannot mess with you anymore. And I found myself at 18 years old trying to figure out what was the solution for trauma? What's the solution for abuse? How do you make meaning of the world? And obviously, like everyone at that age, Brandon, I was like, oh, it's money. And so I made a declaration myself. By the time I'm 21 years old, I want to make $100,000 a year legally. Now, this was super important because my family's in prison for life. I've been in handcuffs multiple times. And as of today, my 3 childhood best friends have been murdered over drugs.
Wow.
I saw my path. I knew where I was going. And that declaration meant everything to me. And so I started learning skills. I started getting into jobs and figuring things out. And by the time I was 21, I cashed my first check for $10,000 working for a Fortune 10 company with no high school diploma and no college education. Wow. Now, you'd be like, oh, great, end of story, life turned awesome. And then that thing happened to me that happens to everybody who gets money for the first time. And my life got flipped upside down.
Oh, wow.
And I found myself by the time I was 26 years old, I was 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, drinking myself to sleep, cheating on my partners. And that's when I put a gun in my mouth.
Wow.
I was done. Dude, I was done. I was like, I thought money was supposed to solve these problems.
And you were 26 at that point?
I was 26. And what happened is that the next day I'm laying in bed. And keep in mind, I'm 350 pounds. I'm eating chocolate cake, smoking a joint, and watching the CrossFit games. Dude, if that's not rock bottom, I don't know what is. And so for whatever reason, I get up and I go in the bathroom and I'm looking at myself in the mirror. And I don't recognize the reflection. But I remember being 8 years old. And the water company had come and turned off our water. Our power was always getting turned off. Our water, our heat in the winter, we were getting evicted. Again, I lived in 30 different homes as a kid. And this one particular day, they turned the water off and I went to the backyard and I grabbed this little blue bucket and I walked across the street to the neighbor's house. And I turned on the spigot on the side of their house. And for the first time, I stole water. And I remember being like, when I'm a grown up, this won't be my life. And it wasn't to some extent, except I was still that hurt, lost little boy. And in that moment, looking in that mirror, having that realization, I asked myself, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? And the answer was no excuses, just results. And it has catapulted me to where I am today, 11, almost 12 years later, talking to you. And in that process, it's been a tremendous amount of work. Therapy, group therapy, EMDR, CBT, men's group therapy, Gestalt therapy, name it, coaching, having a coach, learning, having over 30 trauma-informed certifications and education certifications, right? Putting myself in a position of learning, of growing, of changing, of healing, of challenging my narrative, my identity, and everything. And then just through, call it serendipity, the universe, God, I don't know, whatever it is, now being able to have coached thousands of people throughout the same process that I've gone through to change my life.
Wow. Awesome story. So I want to go back to something in the story. I think everybody has had varying degrees of challenges and traumas. You've definitely gotten more than your fair share, Michael, for sure, without a doubt. But not everyone has that moment of clarity. And then that, I don't know if we call it, I was having dinner with a friend last night and we were talking about the difference between resilience and will. And resilience seems to be this you can kind of bounce back, but you're still kind of playing defense. Will is more like a fire in your belly. You just get up and you go, no, It's going to be different. There's an energy to will. In fact, if you look up will, like in terms of we think about our will, you can't really find a definition. You find a definition for willpower, but not actually for will. So here's my question to you. Where did that come from for you? Where did you get that spark which just fueled you to this place you're at now?
So ever since I was a child, I'll tell you this, my greatest character trait and flaw is that I'm incredibly stubborn. And so when I make up my mind about something,
willpower,
it's
right?
100%, right? And one of the biggest catalysts for really, I think every way that I think about the world is being exposed to not only chaos and violence, but like beauty and grace. And so saying like both sides of the human experience in a very young age made me realize that everything that was happening in my life was wrong. And so because of that, it was a driver for me to create what I wanted in my life. And there have been multiple, I don't want to get it wrong here, man. There's been multiple rock bottoms on this journey. Not graduating high school, being morbidly obese, the list goes on of where it was like, man, there's a shift that has to happen here. What I think is so fascinating, and this is something that's really been sitting on me probably for now the last 9 months, is people always ask me like, define trauma, define abuse, right? When I'm having conversations like this. And I think it's fair to say, obviously, all these experiences, they lead up to who you are. And what I've discovered, for me at least, that feels incredibly true about the experience of trauma abuse is that it's a loss of identity. It's your identity literally being stolen from you, because the most dangerous thing that I could do as a kid was have an opinion. Nothing would get me thrown through a wall faster than speaking my mind. And so you learn how to shut off. You learn how to be robotic. And so that will, right, that we're talking about, that stubbornness that I had got parlayed with this idea of not being able to be myself. And because of that, I turned off and became robotic. And so, Brandon, I became whatever you wanted me to be, whatever you needed to be, because when I did that, I was safe. It was a survival mechanism, right? Because if your favorite band was Styx, I'm like, yo, that's my favorite band too. But if your favorite food is pizza, I'm like, that's my favorite food too. And then people see through that.
Yeah.
People go, wait a second, there's something askew about who you are. And in that, what started to happen is I started to get ostracized as a child. So the weird kid in the corner of the room who's always super violent and odd was me. And so while I have this will and this stubbornness to want to be myself, it was like there's this giant brick wall in front of me that said, don't you dare do that, because you're going to get punched in the face. And so it took me years to be able to step through that, to come through the other side. And without those foundation of rock bottom moments, I honestly don't know if I would be here. Now, that said, the thing that I think differentiates me from many people who have had rock bottom moments is that when I had those, I made decisions that immediately transformed my life. I did not wait for the next one. And so that's where that stubbornness came in, because it's kind of like, you need a little bit of light shining through the darkness in that little bit of a brink of possible disaster that you hold on to, that you go, oh shit, actually, let me grab this thing, because if I do, maybe things will be different. And so I've never tried to make my life better, because I don't know what that means, but I try to make it different. And through being stubborn or having will, like ultimately it's what's led me to where I am.
Super cool answer. I love that. I love that. And so not that we're prescribing everyone to go out and have a rock bottom moment, but it was those things.
It's not a bad idea.
Well, okay. But well, for you though, it was that triggered that decision. So for our conversation today, we talked about setting this up around fear and identity. And for the life of me, I can't figure out which one to start with, because, is it fear, which then leads us to, discovering the true identity? Or fear of embracing that? Or do we need the identity to overcome fear? So you've been on this journey. Where would you start?
Dude, I think that's literally the best question anyone's ever asked me on a podcast. And I've done hundreds of these. I think it's a parallel. I think it's a simultaneous journey. I do not think you can have one without the other, because you're going to be faced with this juxtaposition of wanting to step into who you believe you are while simultaneously battling who you have been, in that conflict of self. And in that, fear is going to arise, but that fear also becomes literally the catalyst for the identity that you're trying to create. And so without being willing to step into the fear, you'll never have the identity. And in that, like, I think about this every single day. That thing that keeps you awake at night is the very thing that you need to do to change your life. If it's 7 sleepless nights and you're like, damn, why am I only thinking about this? That is the crux for everything that becomes different. But think about this, Brandon. Growing up, you're 7 years old, Brandon, right? You're sitting there in the classroom coloring a picture. You're coloring the moon purple. Miss Smith comes up to you and they're like, hey, that's not how you color the moon. And then the other kids hear her say that, and suddenly they're like, yeah, what's wrong with you, Brandon, you loser? And then suddenly you're in this position where because it becomes a dynamic of safety, you turn off your identity as a child because you don't want to be ostracized. You don't want to be judged. You don't want to be ridiculed. And so you stop being yourself. And on a long enough timeline, like, you find that now you don't know how to show up for yourself. You don't know how to say yes or no. You don't have boundaries. You can't name your wants, needs, or interests. When you're in your environment, you don't know which way is up because you've not been allowed to do that in so long you forgot it. But there's that thing inside of you like, I really feel called to do this, but you're terrified. It's reasonable. How could you not be? You've only ever been set up to be terrified of being yourself. You add in the factor of school, home violence, the community. Don't you dare wear those glasses, Brandon. How dare you? And then suddenly that thing that you want that makes you feel you are so pulled away from that you're in disarray. Until the moment in which you make a decision that you're no longer going to give a fuck about what people think about. And by doing that, you're able to step into this place. You're building yourself into this person that you believe that you're capable of being. And I think one of the most fascinating parts of building yourself into that person is that you're going to falter the whole way there, right? But that's how you learn. And if you're willing to be a learner as opposed to someone who already has predetermined their destiny via their actions, fear ultimately becomes a tool, not a hindrance. And so when I sit down, I write in my journal every day. The first thing I write is face fear. And I don't know what that's going to be today, man, but it's going to be there. I promise you. And I fully believe this. If you can reestablish, or even for many people for the first time, establish a relationship with time and death and understand that you are not promised the next sentence, you will act differently in the world. And if you do that, the greatest thing will happen. When you die, that moment right before everything is gone, you will not die with regret like the other people who have a life unlived.
Amen, brother. So I love that idea. That's that parallel of fear and identity, and how they kind of go hand in hand like that. And I think you're right. And when I think about the cancer of the soul, that is regret. It just eats and eats and eats. And there are people listening to this right now that are just nodding their head, yes, like I have traded away who I am, who I want to be, for who others think I'm supposed to be. And we all do to certain degrees because we live in a social system, right? So we're going to make compromises so we fit in. But some of us make those sacrifices, I think, or those trade-offs more in a way that really just cuts at our soul. So for those people listening right now, what's a starting place? Where can they go to start to turn things around for themselves?
Yeah. And dude, I've been that person. You know, if I look at my life at 27, 28 years old, I was like, I have no self-esteem. I have no confidence. I do not believe in myself in any capacity. And the only way that you're going to build up to the place of being able to do that is you're going to have to do difficult things. You're going to have to challenge the narrative of who you think that you are by doing that thing that's so hard, right? It's writing the book, it's running the marathon, leaving the relationship, asking for help, right? I mean, I remember it's fascinating to me that one of the number one things I teach men when they come into my programs is boundaries, right? And it's like, think about this for a second. If you've never been allotted the space to be you, you're going to have to learn how to be you. And that's super difficult. And so when you're in this position, you're like, I want to be able to step into everything that we're talking about right now. The number one thing that I believe that you can do is get massive clarity in your life. This is my belief, There is no course, no therapy session, no coach, no book, no podcast that's going to bring more value to your life than the value that you will have by picking up this thing right here called a pen and taking all the crap in your head and putting it down on paper so you can make meaning of it. And in that, one of the things that you do is you create massive clarity about your boundaries, what is acceptable, what is not, about your values. Most people are living life and they do not know their values. How can you not look? Think about it like this. Without values, you're in a car without a GPS on a road to nowhere. I had to put values into my life to be able to be the person I am today. Honesty, leadership, kindness, self-actualization, and no excuses. I know exactly who I am every day. And that doesn't mean that I won't bend my values, because I'm a human being. We're living in a social construct, like it is what it is. But you need those values in order to be able to effectively, I believe, operate in a society in which you're always being pulled to be anything but you. And then you have to think about your wants, your needs, your interests, your environmental supports, and building out the life that you want to have. But I cannot think of a better way to do this, Brandon, than to pick up a damn pen and write some things down. You need clarity and silence to make meaning of who you are.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So it's almost like, here's the image that was going through my mind as you were talking, Michael. It's like we're stuck on the ground, and our identity of where we want to go, that life we want, it's like it's in the stars. And so, we're this journey is like a rocket ship, but gravity is pulling you back down to the ground. But you're trying to kind of break through that. And so you have to remind yourself on where you're going and why. So how do you keep that fear from overcoming you? How do you keep it going every day? And how do you kind of coach people to keep it going every day?
Yeah, and I love what you said. I think about the concept of escape velocity all the time, because I look at life as kind of plateaus. And I think the more that you grow and you learn, the more that you push yourself into creating who you are. Like, I literally believe you create who you are. Then you reach a new plateau. And once you're on that plateau, you can never go backwards, right? But there's going to be a new level of fear that comes. And that's what gets really interesting, right? It's kind of like this idea, the first time you get on a treadmill, you do a quarter mile. And then one day you do a mile. And the next day you're like, I'm signing up for a half marathon. And then you're doing Moab, right? But like, there's this thing where like, there's this level of fear that you have to be willing to face. And you have to accept that on the backside of it, the likelihood of failure is incredibly high. But in that failure, if you can adapt the understanding that you're learning and not tie yourself to the event of failure or victory, but instead the effort that you put in, then you continue to have effort that matches ultimately what it is that you want to accomplish. And when you make your goal, I think this is the catalyst of all this, however, you have to make your goal so incredibly far-fetched that people go, that is stupid. Why would you even say that? Because then you're moving towards something bigger than you. My goal is very simple. Think Unbroken's mission is to end generational trauma in my lifetime through education and information so that another kid does not have to have a story like I just told you. That is impractical. It's far-fetched, very likely impossible, but that ain't going to stop me. And so when you can align with this massive goal and not put your identity to the accomplishment, but instead to the effort, then fear just becomes a part of the process. Fear, look, man, Trent Shelton, I don't know if you know Trent. Trent's amazing. I heard him say this one. He goes, fear is very simple. Fear is face everything and run, or face everything and rise. And I was like, damn. That's good. I wish I would have came up with that.
That is really good, actually.
Because think about it, man. That's what other choice do you have? Brandon, you sat here one day and you're like, I want to start a podcast. And then you're like, I want to start a podcast. And then a week went by, you're like, I want to start a podcast. And then one day you're like, all right, I'm going to face my fear and do it. 5 years later, here you are.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody wants the goal. Everybody wants the gold medal at the end. Nobody wants to get into the dirt of day one. But when you get into the dirt of day one, that's where all the beauty is. Because guess what? Day one is way more attainable than day 100. And if you're willing to just show up today, success, while not guaranteed, right, is something that's way more palatable and practical than only being like, well, if I can't have it all, I'm not going to do it.
It's beautiful. I love this. So, yeah, so many places to go with this. I think one of the areas I'm really curious about is when people get derailed or can't make these changes, and you're in these, you're working with these in either individuals or in groups, and you see them just keep getting stuck. What are those common derailers?
Yeah. It all comes down to discipline. Like, honestly, it really does. Because if you think about however, go look at the most successful people in the world. And I don't even mean monetarily, but your friend who's like the most killer dad. He shows up to all the games,
Yep.
right? Your sister who does all the things she says she's going to do. Those people don't know anything you and I don't know. They're not special. The difference is discipline. They've made a decision that I'm going to show up and I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to suffer through it because I want what's on the backside of this so much. You're going to fall off. Dude, I'm sitting here recovering from surgery and like, yo, I got to record podcasts. I got to show up. I got to do my thing. I haven't worked in a week. I took the week. I said nothing, right? But you got to get back on because you have to get aligned with that goal. Like, that's the thing. Again, I'm going to come back to that because I really think it becomes your anchor. It's your why. It's the Simon Sinek idea, right?
Yeah.
Because when you anchor yourself against this thing that's greater than you, you're willing to suffer for it. And so even if you're, whether it's work, relationship, career, family, kids, hobbies, like whatever, if you have massive clarity about the way that you're showing up in the world, you won't be confused, right? A confused mind will always fail. And so that's why I think about this. When people get in relationships with each other, they don't ever document everything. Like, to me, I'm like, if I get in a relationship with you, we're going to write down every aspect of the relationship. So there's massive clarity, because when you do that, no one's ever confused. You would not buy a car without getting paperwork, and yet you're getting into relationships without it, right? Like, something about that feels off to me. But it's because of the lack of clarity in which people get lost. So the moment that they are like fall off, they're screwed because they don't know how to get back on because they weren't heading towards anything anyway. So
Right.
One of the early things I do with people I coach, I say, let's figure out your goals today, not 90 days from now, not even a year from now, but how do you want to spend your day? What do you want to accomplish, right? For some people, it's like, man, I just want to not have an emotional outburst. I'm like, cool. How do we do that today,
Yeah.
not tomorrow, right? I want to quit smoking. Great. How do you not smoke one less cigarette today? Perfect. Let's figure that out. And so it's all about having a really clear vision about where you're headed. Because I promise you, I'm going to fall off. You're going to fall off. Everybody listening to this is going to fall off. But it's about getting yourself back up because you are moving towards something in which you find success in this mission.
I love it. So, okay, something else you said there. And I want to, for listeners, I want to hear your perspective on it. The comparison and power of goals, like, I don't want to have an emotional outburst today. And then the power of, in comparison to purpose, which is that big, lofty thing, right? That need in the world that we want to meet. And we're going to strive for it. And even if we don't reach it, we're going to move the needle on that thing. I find for some people, a couple things around purpose. It can be hard for them to find it, hard for them to kind of identify it. And sometimes it might change. They might say, my purpose right now is I just want to be the best dad I can be. And then they kind of do that, right? And then the kids move out and they're great kids, and a person might become a grandfather, but then they have a new purpose. So how do you think about those things? The comparison between goals and purpose, and which matters more if they do?
Yeah, I don't know one matters more or less than the other. Honestly, I don't know. But what I will say is this: like, I think it's okay to be malleable. Like, be okay with the idea that your mission, that your goal, that your big purpose today might not be that tomorrow. I tell people all the time, if I wake up tomorrow morning, and I am not joking, even though I put in almost a decade of work into this company, I will close it down if I wake up tomorrow and I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, without hesitation, right? I think it's all about the alignment. I want to create context around something that I think is going to catch people off guard. I only do what I want to do, and I never do what I don't want to do. It doesn't mean I don't do the minutia of the day-to-day life, but what I mean by this is, think about this. If I've spent my whole life trying to claim identity and move towards things that make me who I am, then to do things that feel askew of that or offset of that means that I'm not actually living authentically as who I am. And so I think when you are trying to attain goals and live life with purpose, you have to first ask yourself, are you actually doing this for you? I think that is the most important thing, because so many people are like, I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing it for the company. Why? Like, they don't care about your kids do not care about your dreams. I hate to break it to you. I'm super sorry. They don't give a shit. Right. And so what you have to do is think about, like, it's true. It's 100. Go ask your kid if they care about your dream, Brandon. Like, no. Thanks, Dad. Thanks.
Yeah, they don't. Unless it means more of their dream. If it ties into their dream, then that's fine.
Right? And so, like, the truth about it is, when you have massive alignment with who you are and you're operating through that, you won't be in question about your dreams or your purpose, because you'll be moving towards them, and they will change. Like, one of my goals really used to be, like, I want to be on the cover of New York Times or New York Time magazine. Geez. And now it's like, I don't really care about that anymore, but I do want to be a New York Times bestselling author. That's important to me. That's one of my goals. That's in alignment, however, with the purpose. So maybe you could look at it kind of like a layer, and purpose is at the top, and then goals lead you to that purpose. But to find that and to discover that, I'm going to go back to what I said. I think it's about clarity. I think it's about silence. I think it's about the meditation and the journaling and asking yourself, what do I want? The quality of your questions determine the quality of your life. And some of you just are not asking yourself hard enough questions. I ask myself every day, who do I want to be today? Who do I need to be today to show up to live my life in an authentic way? Sometimes that means saying no to things. Sometimes that means saying yes to things. Sometimes that means in the moment being like, oh, actually, this isn't in alignment with who I am. I think the goals start to come when you take the moment to, like, get clear about who you are. Because think about this, if you're like, okay, I want to set a goal, but you have no values in your life, you will do anything to get that goal. Some of those things might be illegal. Some of those things might be against your moral character and your value. When I was a kid, my goal was simple. I want to make money. There was no value in alignment with those goals. So how did I make money? I sold drugs. I broke into houses. I stole cars. I hurt people, whatever it took to make money, right? I had no value. Well, now my values are honesty, leadership, kindness, self-actualization, no excuses. That means that I have to operate within that funnel towards the goals that I want to accomplish in my life. Again, this all, like, it's a giant circle. It's a cylinder of all these things you kind of toss in, you turn the blender on, and suddenly you have a shake on the other side. Yeah. I think you need to have all the bits and pieces together to be able to create that thing. If you put a cake in the oven with no flour, you're not going to have a cake. You need all the ingredients. And so people get so caught up on goals and purpose, but I'm like, what the hell are your values? Who are you in the world? What are your boundaries? What are your wants and needs and interests? Who are the people you align with? How do you know whether or not you want to be in connection with other human beings? Like, massive clarity, man. I could go about this all day long, but at the end of the day, it truly is clarity. How do you go somewhere that you don't know you're going? Here's what's so fascinating about this. You already know what to do. You're ignoring it. You're hiding from it. You're running from it because it's scary. Yeah, no shit. But that's how your life changes, by facing that thing in front of you, that thing that you're terrified of, because that's the difference. Everything that you want is on the other side of your willingness to look at yourself in the mirror, to acknowledge that you're not living your life like you could, and step into what's next. And it's going to be painful before it gets better, I promise you, because you didn't get here by accident. Like, let me tell you this. I did not get to 350 pounds smoking 2 packs a day and drinking myself to sleep by accident. But what I can tell you is it takes as much effort and energy to destroy your life as it does to create your life. And so when you're in this moment, I dare you, I challenge you, go look at yourself in the mirror for 5 minutes. 99% of you can't do it yet. And every single day you got to earn every inch of the life that you have. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. You want the first step? Go look in the mirror.
Great. Beautiful. I love that. So, Michael, this has been great. So I ask all my guests this question at the end of our show. What's one life hack for us for how we can have either better relationships or better conversations, either at work or at home, or frankly, even with ourselves?
Yeah. Massive clarity. I'm just going to keep coming back to it. You have to know what's acceptable and what is not acceptable in your life, how you show up in your life and how you don't, how everything interacts around you. Like I know this is far-fetched. We live in the Matrix, not in like a literal program, but when you think about the ability that you have to create and construct your life, like it is entirely built around what you want. My life, I cannot tell you this with enough emphasis. My life is literally in this moment exactly what I want it to be. Tomorrow it won't be because I'll continue to move forward, right?
Yeah.
But then tomorrow also I'll say the same exact thing, right? Which is what's fascinating about it. So you continue to build who you are and honor your truth. You want to communicate with people, stop lying to them. You're unhappy in the relationship, you want to quit the job, like you need to do those things. You want to start the podcast, you want to write the book, you need to do those things. But you got to get honest with yourself because people see through it. You've had people in your life be like, yo, that does not feel copacetic. Like whatever you're saying right now feels really off to what you're characterizing in your actual life. People are like, think about this for a second. People are like, I want to write a book. And I'm like, great. How many sentences have you written in that book? None. Okay, great. Well, good luck writing that book. Right? Again, it's really, truly, it's about the clarity. It's about getting on the same page with the people in your life, being willing to face the fear of the conversation while you're going to get judged, because guess what? It's happening anyway. People don't like you. It's fine. Get over it. And then you just continue to do that ad nauseum while you create your life. And people will come into your life and people will come out to your life. You will have seasons in that you will change, and accept that. Be willing to acknowledge and accept the truth that the person you are today is not going to be the person you are tomorrow. And it's okay to let go of that and communicate that to other people. Because one of the most fascinating things that will happen in that communication, you're going to find out who actually cares about you and who doesn't. Because as you start to change, there are people who are going to try to pull you down, and there are people who are going to try to rise you up. And you got to get in alignment with those people. Because right now you have somebody in your life, when you tell them your dream, they laugh at you. Why are you having that person in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, this was great. If people want to follow you, learn more about you, get a copy of your book, where can they go?
Yeah, I'm everywhere on social media at Michael Unbroken. But you can go to Think Unbroken Podcast or thinkunbrokenpodcast.com. I tell everybody, you never have to buy a book, go to a program, do an event, nothing. I put everything on that show. Great.
Michael, this was great. Well, you're a real gift and an inspiration. Keep up all the great work that you do in the world. Michael's story truly is an inspiring one. I think he's overcome more than his fair share of traumas and challenges. That said, we all have had traumas and challenges. Not one of us has been immune to that or avoided those things. And we've all dealt with them in different ways. So what I liked about his story and his approach is he's saying we all have the choice to live a different life and to truly live out the identity that we want. So just a few highlights from some of the conversations. He did talk about, first of all, he said trauma is a loss of identity. And so his whole journey is about reclaiming his identity. He said, you start with massive clarity. I think you heard him use that phrase regularly. And really what he meant by that was defining not only who you want to be, but define your values. What really guides how you want to operate in the world. And when you do make those steps forward and you try those new things, you step into fear, he said, don't view it as failure, view it as learning. I'm going to learn through this experience and get smarter, better, faster. He did say align to a bigger goal or purpose. We talked about that for quite some time. And then he said, be disciplined. The big difference between people who are successful overall in life and successful on this kind of journey is their discipline. They have a disciplined rhythm to this progress. And then finally, as we were talking about it, he'd remind us, he said, but it's okay to be malleable. It's okay to change. Maybe you're going to wake up tomorrow and decide that you want to take a different direction. But that's okay because you made that choice. You decided. So hopefully there's something in his story that inspired you like it inspired me to be thinking a little bit more about how you want 2022 to be for you and the steps you can take to start move you from here to there.